Welcome to Norse Code, the number one podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host and producer. My name is James Pagoshnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him best from the Wide Left Substack. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, how is the Home Run Derby treating you?
Surprisingly well. So I don't actually know any of these players, nor am I watching it, but it turns out these apps that I won't name, just in case I get a sponsorship later, it turns out these apps just let you bet whatever you want. Sorry, it's not betting. It's fantasy. Pick your teams regardless of your level of knowledge. And I picked some people whose names seemed nice. Pete Alonso, for example. And I made like $100. So I think the key is to not know anything about the sport that you're picking for. It's not betting.
That actually would make a lot of sense considering you know a fair amount of football, and you were complaining a lot when we were in Denver about how all the things you knew about football were apparently wrong. That was you were just losing a bunch of money in Colorado, yeah.
Yeah, that was really upsetting. I find that the more I know about the WNBA, the less I earn, but I'm still positive, at least, on the WNBA.
And with that, welcome to this episode of Norse Code. We've got some news for you. It's not all good. We do have some Viking stuff to go over, including the Dewey or versions of Dewey and Khyree Jackson and some camp stuff as well. But before we begin, once again, thank you guys so much for listening to Norse Code. If you enjoy the show and would like to help us out financially, you can do so a couple of different ways. You can go over to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there for $3.50 a month or a little less for the year subscription. You get access to bonus material, which we put out a new one very beginning of July. And you get access to the Discord, all of that, over at patreon.com/NorseCode. Special thank you to David Bandy and Eric Dahlberg. Thank you so much for subscribing and helping us out quite a bit. We really do appreciate it. We also raise money through paypal.me/NorseCode. That's a one-time donation. Or you can go over to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up a number of different items, include t-shirts, mugs, baby onesies, shower curtains. This will be important later. That sort of thing over at norsecode.threadless.com. And a special announcement, because it's almost August. And we usually record once every 2 weeks, once every three weeks or so during the off season. So I wanted to mention this now before it got to August 1st. On August 1st, the Hell League registration will begin.
Oh my gosh.
It is time.
That's incredible.
It is time for Hell League registration. Registration lasts from the very beginning of August to the very end of August. And I'll be putting teams together, all of that. Here's the special thing this year for the Hell League. If you submit, you are automatically in the Hell League. I'm going to try to include everyone who signs up or who emails me or sends me a DM on Twitter during the month of August. I will find a way for you to be into the Hell League. This is a terrible idea. This is going to lead to so many problems, and I can't wait. This is gonna be an absolute nightmare to be a part of, and really, it's the only way I can one up a reef with trying to destroy my life. So this is what we're going to do.
Whoa! To be clear, this is a new development for both of us. that James is on a path where actually now he has to compete over who is destroying his life more. So I just want to pause. Recognize that we're at this spot, and this could change the dynamic of the show, but not the mailbag questions. James will still be fielding relationship corner questions. I will still be fielding parenting corner questions.
Naturally.
Just want to make that clear.
But I'm going to try to make sure that everyone who signs up for the Hell League ends up getting in. So expect that to begin August 1st, and we'll have some fun. In quotations. I like how around the time that I'll be like organizing this, I'll be all like pilled out due to my back surgery. Because I think the surgery's on the 27th or 28th. It's the Wednesday that week.
Amazing time.
So like right around that time, I'll be like getting people into like teams or getting people into leagues. Oh, this is going to be good. This is going to lead to so many problems.
Yeah.
I personally can't wait. So let's get into the show. And the first thing that we have to mention is what happened with Jordan Addison. He was found sleeping in a car out by LAX. There's now questions as to whether or not this was alcohol or drug related. It's his second traffic offense in 2 years, 1 year, and there's also a question of whether or not this would count as a Dewey if it were drug related. Arif, can you please handle this?
Jeez. Yeah, so Jordan Addison was arrested on suspicion of driving under the influence. He was blocking a lane, or he was in a car that was blocking a lane of a freeway near LAX, headed northbound. And okay, so I think like some people have come away with like different complete versions of the story, and like some people think, for example, like he parked the car and fell asleep, and it's like, yeah, the car is stopped, so in a sense he parked the car, but when you say parked the car, it invokes the image of being in a parking spot. This was not that. It was blocking a lane. um it was found, or he was arrested at 11:36 p.m. Pacific, which for these kinds of violations is relatively early in the night. And the police, they brought him in, they released him from custody essentially exactly 2 hours later. And they didn't release anything like blood alcohol content or anything like that. So we don't have proof that Jordan Addison was driving under the influence, but I will say that it is pretty likely, though not certain, that when you find someone asleep at the wheel in the middle of a highway, something has probably happened, and that something probably has something to do with a mind-altering substance. Now, there could be any number of other things that could have led to this, right? It could have been a bad drug interaction between two prescription drugs. It could be that he had a previously unknown condition that causes narcolepsy. Like, these are all very small probability items that I don't think are the thing that happened, but are reasons that we should at least keep somewhat of an open mind about what occurred here. Now, he has not earned the benefit of the doubt, of course, because last year at I think like a week from tomorrow, or a week from next week or something like that, he was arrested for driving 140 miles per hour on a freeway in Minnesota. He pled down the charge. It's a misdemeanor speeding charge. Reckless driving was dismissed. So, but I mean, we know it is reckless driving. And I think the only reason he was able to plead it down to a misdemeanor speeding charge is because there was not anyone else on the highway. And, he could have maybe made an argument about there being a purpose to his driving. That's the whole dog story, right? And so that goes from reckless to speeding, right? But, that gives us another piece of evidence about what his driving behavior is. What's interesting is also this is a different car. It's like a white Rolls Royce and not his Lamborghini. So, okay, that's the kind of person he is. Drives a bunch of cars, enjoys driving them very fast, and now he's found asleep at the wheel. Ben Gessling on K-Fan, at least according to the Persuasion, I haven't listened to this clip, so forgive me if I'm misquoting. But this tweet was shared around, and Gessling was tagged in it. And as far as I can tell, he didn't correct it. So I'm going to assume that because this went relatively far, and because he was tagged in it, and he hasn't corrected it, that it's likely correct. But just putting this out there that I haven't verified it. Jordan Addison's Dewey may not be about alcohol, which is perhaps why the police report doesn't contain anything about blood alcohol content. But it could have been something related to marijuana, maybe like an edible, which could change the nature of it just from a league punishment perspective. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know what the bylaws are with regard to that. Personally, I suspect that it wouldn't. Because if it's driving under the influence, it's driving under the influence. And a lot of states will have definitions for driving under the influence that are different for different classifications of mind-altering substances, whether it's alcohol or drugs or whatever. But it's still the same charge in most states. And I imagine the language in the CBA is just, if there is DUI language in the CBA, it's just DUI. If not, then the NFL relies on precedent, and precedent is likely just regular DUI as opposed to an alcohol-specific one or a marijuana-specific one. Now, at some point, Gessling had specified that like marijuana is legal in California. I don't see why that's necessarily all that relevant, except it may mean that the NFL, if it's found that he used marijuana before driving, that the NFL may not punish him for using marijuana. But yeah, I mean, alcohol is also legal in California, and you're still not allowed to drive while drunk, right? So I don't know that that's extraordinarily relevant, except it may not trigger the NFL's marijuana policy if it's true. That's been a point of contention with the NFLPA and the NFL about in states where it's legal, etc. But Gessling specifically said that if alcohol is involved, the suspension could be at least 3 games, because a lot of these suspensions are built off of precedent and not just what's in the CBA. I imagine even if it was marijuana related. The problem is it's pretty difficult to tell in the moment. Maybe you have to rely on police testimony, like smelling marijuana in the car or something like that. We don't really have like a blood alcohol content or blood cannabinoid content test that's regularly accepted and used, and there's no legal limit. It's just, is it impacting your judgment when you're driving, sort of thing. And he fell asleep at the wheel, so one could reasonably make the argument that happened. But yeah, we don't know a lot. The reason that this is particularly concerning, aside from his history, is that like we have like another very tragic incident that occurred just the week prior that's related.
Yeah. And that's the problem, is that there's a bunch of things we don't know about this, and the things that are possible, or in this case, potentially likely, they're not great. And it doesn't really lead to a lot of faith as far as his decisions are concerned. The Vikings are in a situation where he's still on a rookie deal, obviously, but it once is kind of an aberration, and there was the dog thing that added to it. Okay, fine. Twice in a year, that's suspicious, and 3's a pattern. So, and this may be, I haven't even seen if anybody's like discovered if he was actually on a flight from LAX, or like if he like came back at LAX and he, had to take like something to sleep on the flight or something. There's a bunch of possibilities here, and we don't have a lot of information yet. It's just not great when somebody who had shown a lot of promise, and especially when JJ had gone out, had played fairly well, is continuing to show some poor judgment. Which is also to say that if we're going to be reading the tea leaves of Instagram, which let's do that for a moment, there was a post today involving what appeared to be like a mimosa outside, which, under normal circumstances is fine, but when you just got booked for a Dewey, it's not a great look. And he has since taken, read the room. He has since taken it down, and I believe scrubbed his Instagram of all Minnesota Vikings related things too. So for whatever that's worth, and I hate when we have to report on dumb things like that, but that is a thing. So it's not great, and the look of the situation is obviously not positive. So we get to move from that to something worse. The Khyree Jackson thing is obviously not great either. 4th round pick, corner, and had passed away about a week or so ago.
Yeah. So Khyree Jackson was in a car accident and he was in the car with 2 of his high school teammates. I don't know if it was the same high school teammates that have been talked about in previous profiles of Khyree Jackson. He mentioned that one of the things that motivated him to get back involved in football is seeing his high school teammates do well and land like scholarships at Division II and Division I schools and continue to play well. But in previous profiles of Jackson, very humanizing moment was like when they discussed that he had been so embarrassed about not playing football that he kind of stayed at home the whole time. And this is kind of where, he got good enough at NBA 2K and legitimately quite good that he'd considered a pro career in that before he ended up getting a job. I think working the deli at a grocery store, and then earning employee of the month. And from there going to a JUCO, and then going to another JUCO, and then to Alabama and then Oregon. And so, I don't know if it's the same teammates, but like, it's very clear that these are like really important people to him, and that they play a pretty big role, which is probably why he was in a car with them in Maryland. And the police are investigating. We still don't know. I looked it up right before the show. We still don't know what the status of that investigation is, but the police are investigating it as a possible DUI incident. The evidence suggests, based off of the reporting that we have, that the driver of the other car may have been under the influence and pushed the car that Khyree Jackson was in off the road, or had caused the accident by hitting the car in some way. It's tough because, based off of some tweets that have gone around, which I can't verify their accuracy or anything like that. So again, grain of salt. It seems like the driver of the other car may have known Khyree Jackson, which kind of adds to how tragic it is, and how awful she might feel about the whole thing. And people aren't willing to lend sympathy to somebody who engaged in such a reckless reckless behavior that led to the death of somebody. But it's like another element here, right? That is something that's kind of deep here. And then it got even worse, improbably, when there was a vigil held at Khyree Jackson's high school. There was a shooting at that high school at the moment, based off of what I could find off of a quick Google search. We don't know the motive of the shooting, but the latest reporting I can find suggests that one person died in that shooting, and another person is in the hospital as a result. And so tragedy is kind of piling upon tragedies. So all three members of the population of that vehicle died, and then also someone at the vigil died. There's just a lot of death here that's just really difficult to deal with. And the Vikings, having lost another cornerback recently, like, I know that Gladney wasn't on the team. He was a Chiefs cornerback at the time, but a lot of members of that team were good friends with Jeff Gladney. Having that just happen, and also having several incidents with the Vikings where you have Deweys, Wes Phillips, the offensive coordinator, is one of them. Jordan Addison potentially is another one. It just feels like there's just like a lot going on with this team, where, I mean, there's some like bad luck here, right, with like Jackson, and then there's some like bad juju here, right, with like Wes Phillips and potentially Jordan Addison. So it's bad. It sucks. There's not really like a way around it, but I imagine from here the Vikings are probably going to be pretty proactive about driving under the influence, just because of both of these incidents, like as an effort that they'll probably take within the community. And hopefully that does a lot of good, but it's really tough to have like the team go through all of this stuff in a week.
Yeah, there's a lot happening in short order, and it's not good. It's not easy to be dealing with. I'm reminded of the season where the offensive line coach died, like right before camp.
Yeah, Tony Sperano. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not wanting to make direct comparisons to that, but it has a feeling of like, oh, this may be bigger. This may end up meaning more in the long run. And it's really unfortunate. This is a 4th round pick, and human life. It's just I feel bad mentioning that he was a 4th round pick on this as to why it's bad, but it's from a team standpoint, this is not good for a number of reasons. So,
well, yeah, I mean, the team had made a pretty significant investment in Khyree Jackson. Jackson was very excited about that level of investment. And it's very clear based off of his story that he very much values people believing in him, which is why he loved Oregon so much. Coach Dan Lanning believed in him a lot, and that was like a big. You can see some of the videos. Like Oregon tweeted out a video, a memorial video of Khyree Jackson, and one of the things that he mentions is kind of the faith that Oregon had showed him. It's very important to him, and the Vikings had shown him very similar faith, and so it adds to everything involved here, right? That the Vikings, obviously organizationally, there are things that you have to take care of. It always feels crass to talk about, but then also on top of that, the fact that all of these organizational decisions touch human lives in very real ways kind of adds to the pain and the sorrow.
Yeah. So we have all of that to cover. We're done with that. Is there any news out of camp outside of all of this?
Not a ton. It's kind of difficult to focus on stuff like position battles. The Star Tribune, for example, right after that had happened, had a piece go out previewing the cornerbacks and mentioned that the Vikings should probably add a cornerback. And here's a thing that I wanted to add to this from like a sports reporting perspective, because I know that people have mentioned before that they like it when I talk about kind of the way sports reporters think or approach these stories. What I think likely happened is that the writer of the piece, Jim Suhan, probably turned that piece in several days before. These kind of camp preview pieces are generally written well beforehand. I've done that, and then you put them out on a schedule. But it was also very clear that given that this happened, that this scheduled piece would need to be updated. Now, this is a pretty normal procedure, because if you're writing this several days beforehand, any number of news items could change the piece. And typically, it's like, this guy got arrested, or the Vikings just traded for a guy or traded away a guy. And so you're going to have to put a note in the appropriate section of the piece to do that. And that was probably, my guess is probably what happened here, is that, 5-6 paragraphs in, they mention the Khyree Jackson thing as like a paragraph, like, hey, and because of this, they're going to have to doubly make sure that they invest in cornerback. And it felt really crass because it occurred hours after we learned about the news. Someone had mentioned that the story went live and then they edited it. Maybe that's the case. I don't know. My guess is it was edited very shortly before it was published. And honestly, given that they had some knowledge of this as they were editing it, obviously those who wouldn't be editing it, they probably should have just spiked the piece. It was a Friday piece anyway. It's not typically that valuable for the purposes of like a newspaper, right? Plus, they already have a story that they're running that day, the Khyree Jackson story. That should be kind of the centerpiece there in the sports section.
Tasteless. Tasteless is the word that comes to mind here.
Yeah, it's certainly, that's the effect. It's this very tasteless piece about the Vikings within hours, right? Within hours, the Vikings need to fix the cornerback spot. And I'm not saying, what they did was good. I'm just saying this is what I think happened. When Eric Thompson tweeted out, like, I can't believe they did that, I was like, well, I don't think it exactly happened the way that you're describing. A lot of people seem to respond to me as if I was justifying what had happened. No, I think they should have spiked the piece because they were very clearly aware of what had happened. That's why they edited the piece before publish, or at least very shortly after publish. If you're aware of that, then don't run the piece, or at least wait until Monday, Tuesday, right? Let this person's life be kind of the centerpiece of the story. Like, the team might need to act a lot quicker because they have shorter deadlines. They had to move very quickly after Tony Sperano passed away to figure out a solution at the offensive line. And as media members, we often think of ourselves as moving at the same speed of the team, or having to move at the same speed of the team. And I very much sympathize with that, but we don't actually have to do that. Our job is it's to do a lot of things. One of our jobs is to tell stories and, give us kind of some insight on the team. And right now, the story that you want to tell and the insight that you want to give is not, oh no, the Vikings have trouble at cornerback. It's, this person's life just ended. Let's talk about kind of what that means for everybody in a very real emotional sense that respects who they were as a person, as a human being. And so, when Tony Soprano passed away, one of the questions that was asked really quickly in the presser was, well, are you going to replace him? And that was roundly considered to be a fairly tasteless question. It is a question that the Vikings almost certainly were considering very shortly after it had happened. But in the context of a media environment where you're asking the questions, wasn't really appropriate. And this is along those same lines. It was tasteless. They made a huge mistake here, but they probably made the mistake because the piece was already scheduled and they were in a mindset where when changes occur to a piece about to be scheduled, you make edits and not in a mindset of what's the best move here. So just wanted to put that out there. But now the team is almost certainly in some sort of figure it out mode for trying to see what they can do at the cornerback position because they had some plans. And unfortunately, they won't be able to realize those plans. And at the end of the year, people are not actually going to give them that much leeway on the fact that a player on their team passed away, which sounds cruel, but is also true, right? Like when the Vikings offensive line was very poor that year after Soprano passed away, it actually was not a big part of the reasons that people were giving, right? The team does have an obligation to fans and to the owner to maximize their chances of winning. So they're probably working on this cornerback thing, but that doesn't make it the same in terms of what our obligations are, except to report them as they're happening and to figure out kind of what the appropriate distance is to talk about it from a diagnostic perspective and like what the team should be doing. So, we're heading into training camp. The team will want to add another player soon. They have another roster spot and they want to maximize their chances of winning. Almost certainly, I shouldn't say almost certainly, a really good chance that player will be playing the same position, but not a guarantee. And it's gonna be a pretty awkward situation. But I think everyone's going to be pretty understanding of why it has to happen.
Yeah. Otherwise, there's not really much more to talk about because camp is going to open up here soon, but it's the middle of July.
And all of the camp conversations that people have been having, we've been kind of already having, like who's going to be wide receiver 3, well, assuming Jordan Addison was wide receiver 2, right? Who's going to be wide receiver 3? Well, most people think it's probably Brandon Powell, but Jalen Naylor has a really good shot. Okay, that's been discussed. Who's going to be the starting quarterback? Well, it's almost certainly going to be Sam Darnold, unless J.J. McCarthy's change in mechanics gets resolved a lot sooner than people expect, right? But the plan is that McCarthy is going to sit for all or most of the season, right? Who's going to be quarterback 2? Probably actually not McCarthy, probably Nick Mullins. Although if they make a quarterback change as opposed to need somebody to go in for an injured Sam Darnold, it'll probably be Nick Mullins. Or it'll probably be J.J. McCarthy in a change scenario, but an injury substitute is probably Nick Mullins. These are all questions that we kind of already know the answers to. What's the likely, who are the starting cornerbacks? That is still probably Byron Murphy and Shaq Griffin on the outside. And then in 3 cornerback sets, Murphy might kick inside and we could see a Caleb Evans on the outside, or Murphy could stay on the outside. It could be Mekhi Blackman on the inside. I feel like everyone kind of knows these. And so we're not going to spend a ton of time on these camp questions because it's like we've discussed a lot of them. And if we haven't, certainly all of the other media that you've consumed probably has in a lot more detail.
Yeah. So we're going to go to the mailbag. There's not a ton of Viking stuff in here, but the first couple questions are pretty good on it. So Zach Dixon asks, many positions seem to have their, quote, peak years, speaking in terms of age. Can the same be said of coaches? Would it be reasonable to expect Kevin O'Connell to be on the rise, or is there no correlation between years of experience as a head coach and performance?
So there is actually a fairly small correlation. The problem is that there's a survivorship bias, so it's actually really difficult to get clean data on this because if you're a bad head coach when you're 40, you're probably not also a head coach when you're 51. Like you probably don't get a second and almost certainly not a third chance to be a head coach. And so if you're hired at 44, right, that's different than being hired at 40. And maybe you get better as a coach over those years on average, and more 44-year-olds get to stay on as 45-year-olds. So it tends to make the data pretty difficult. But I did read a book a long time ago called Game Plan, A Radical Approach to Decision Making in the National Football League. This is like very proto-analytic stuff, well before kind of the modern analytics approach that we see in football. I want to be pretty relatively cautious here. We're talking about populations, not individuals. And so these are kind of general trends that might help inform the way that you think about these things, but individual coaches can obviously vary quite a bit. And I imagine that the confidence bands on this are fairly wide. Once you attempt to account for this survivorship bias, where if you don't account for it, yes, coaches get better as they age because there's a bunch of bad 40-year-old coaches, and the good 40-year-old coaches survive to become 41, 42, 43, all the way to 50, 51, 52, 53. So it is a problem. But once you account for that in some way, then there does seem to be a peak age. And again, this is like fairly old, so it could be, maybe it doesn't take into account how Mike Tomlin is coaching now, or how Andy Reid is coaching now, or Bill Belichick right before he retired, or Pete Carroll right now. Like Mike Tomlin in this data set is generally considered a fairly young-ish coach. That's how long ago it is, right? I don't think anyone really considers him to be a young coach anymore. First of all, coaching has gotten younger. But second, obviously, due to the passage of time, Mike Tomlin has gotten older. That's life, I guess. So it is difficult, right? But the data seems to suggest that the peak age is around 51. And it reminds me of a study done a bit ago about youth in leadership positions, where, again, once you account for a survivorship bias, it seems to be that though, generally speaking, older people lose a little bit of flexibility, learning capacity, and a bunch of other traits associated with mental acuity. They make up for it because of experience. Like literally, the studies seem to suggest that experience is a huge benefit as you age. And the ages in these studies actually seem to correlate fairly well with what the charts show in this book, Game Plan, where 51 is actually not a bad age for a leader. I saw these studies come up pretty recently, say after a presidential debate, when they talked about ages. But, that's neither here nor there. There is a point where that advantage declines. Who's to say what that means? And it has to be assessed individually. I would argue that Bill Belichick was a great coach well past the age of 51, and I would suggest he probably didn't even peak at age 51, right? Same with Pete Carroll. These are individuals, right? It's just that generally speaking, it does seem to be the case that after your early 50s, you're less likely to be a good coach. It's less likely the case that the accumulated advantage of experience begins outweighing some of the other things that come up with age.
Let's go to our next question, which is from Janik Eckhart. Janik? Apologies. Did J.J. McCarthy's teammates go to his last birthday party? And who will be off the team sooner, Will Reichard or J.J. McCarthy?
Jesus. Well, McCarthy gets basically a pass for this year. Reichard doesn't. Oh, yeah. I mean, I feel like it's pretty easy to say McCarthy's going to stay on the team longer, so Reichard's off the team sooner, probably. But yeah, if Reichard's bad at the end of the year, the Vikings are going to force I mean, technically they're competing now with John Parker Romo, but I mean, we know the score. But next year, the next John Parker Romo, which could be the old John Parker Romo, will be competing with Will Reichard. And if Reichard had a bad year, well, he's gone. If McCarthy plays, that's kind of a surprise, kind of. And if he has a bad year, people are going to be okay with it. I mean, see how long people stuck with like Justin Fields? Your first round quarterbacks can survive a lot. Christian Ponder survived a lot. Kickers just don't get that. So is Reichard the best kicking prospect? Based off of my limited reading of the data, yeah, probably.
I mean, Luke did just put out that piece.
Yeah, it's not a comparative piece, so I can't use it to say Reichert is the best kicking prospect. But he does break down the mechanics of kicking between Reichert and John Parker Romo, and he compares it to the mechanics that we've seen from Daniel Carlson and how that's changed in Minnesota and in Las Vegas. The mechanics of Blair Walsh and his kicking, the mechanics of Justin Tucker, and how consistent they are. It's a really good piece for kind of learning as much as you can about what techniques kickers attempt to isolate and improve on, and how that might impact the competition between John Parker Romo and Will Reichert, and maybe why Reichert was a draft prospect and John Parker Romo wasn't. But it doesn't tell us that Reichert was a better prospect than, say, some of these other kickers. But yeah, I think that McCarthy is going to be on the team longer. As for the birthday party, I'm going to say yes. It seems like he was pretty popular. And also, if not, I feel like Harbaugh would make all the teammates go to the. He feels like somebody who would like make the team go.
Charles Wrights asks, also responsible for a hell of a moment for you on Twitter the other day.
Oh,
I enjoyed that. Charles Wrights asks, is there any indication, either historical or from current buzz, on how much we'll see McCarthy in the preseason? How much does it change depending on whether he's QB3, as I expect, or QB2?
Yeah, one would think that as QB3, and given that it's only a 3-game preseason, not a 4-game preseason, one would think that as QB3, he's going to see a little bit more because with like these McVay guys and historically with Kevin O'Connell, we just don't see QB1 in the preseason. So we see QB2 and then QB3, and then QB3 gets the bulk of snaps. But I think it doesn't matter. I think that McCarthy is going to get the bulk of snaps either way. And he's also going to get an opportunity to play with the second team just because it's probably good for him to do that and not because he's in a genuine competition with Nick Mullins. Now, he could force the issue by playing extremely well and being in a genuine competition. But for right now, I would argue that he's not until he forces the issue. But I think that no matter what, he's probably going to see the bulk of snaps. And yeah, we're probably going to see a good chunk of that happen because even as it's important that Sam Darnold get reps, it seems like the Vikings much prefer for the starters to get those reps in joint practices rather than the preseason.
Chris asks, do you think we could convince Kwesi to just budget for and assign a designated driver for Jordan Addison? Also, have we moved from not being angry to just being disappointed back to being angry again at him for this one?
Yeah, but I mean, I'm going to reserve my anger for when we get more information about the Dewey stuff. But I think like having that anger ready in reserve is appropriate.
Reserve anger is important.
Yeah. You got to fill up your anger reserves. Anger on high alert, as it were. Don't launch it, but be ready. Okay, so here's the thing. The NFLPA already has a program for this where they will already comp you your Uber and provide it for you. Now, mind you, almost no NFL players need to be comped for their Uber. Trust me, I'm very much in the actually these guys get paid a lot less than you think, especially these practice squad guys. And it's difficult for them to build long-term wealth, given what seems like in the short term a pretty high salary. A practice squad guy is going to make over $100,000 a year. Problem is, of course, in 3 years he probably isn't going to make anything. And so I want to be careful about these guys have a lot of money because most of them have a lot less money than people think. That said, it is an Uber, and so I don't think the NFLPA needs to comp them. I'm glad they do. They advertise this program, and many teams also, independent of the NFLPA, have a program like that where there's a number and someone will pick you up either due to a private service or the team service. So it wouldn't shock me if the Vikings already had that and that you wouldn't need to convince Kwesi to budget for it. It might be now this is an assigned designated driver for all times, which maybe, but like honestly, that's like Adam Schefter has an assigned driver, obviously for a completely different reason. And Jordan Addison is not as important to the team as Adam Schefter is to ESPN. You get what I mean? Like he's probably not getting a permanent designated driver. Justin Jefferson might. The quarterbacks almost always do if they want one. But Jordan Addison, figure your life out, actually.
Yeah, as it turns out. Let's go to Cam X Storm, who asks, "Do the Vikings still offer a kombucha bar at the team facility? And if so, how much kombucha would one need to consume to fall asleep at the wheel?"
I would imagine a lot.
This is Rudy and Floyd territory.
Yeah, we did another great spin-off sitcom. Oh, you. Yeah, I imagine a lot. Not all kombucha is alcoholic. I mean, a lot of it is. Don't get me wrong. But like the reason that you can sell kombucha in grocery stores is because the alcohol percentage is like very low. So it would be a lot. I'm not going to say you can't drink so much that you couldn't prevent yourself from falling asleep at the wheel. Someone alleges that that's what they did, right? But it would take a lot, quite a lot.
Your body would be running it out one way or another.
Yeah, it's like the absorption rate versus the release rate of the alcohol is you're probably battling that at that point.
Yeah. Also from Cam X Storm, and now we're basically at the point where we're not talking about Viking stuff anymore. James recently shared a story.
Fast show.
Yeah, well, it's the middle of July, literally July 15th.
The Ides of July.
The Ides of July. James recently shared a story about an attempted maiming while DJing a wedding. Have the Norse Code hosts had any other narrowly avoided catastrophic injuries? So those of you who missed it, on Twitter, I had posted a story of how I was nearly struck by a. Should I just tell
Smooth
it?
Criminal.
Should I just? Yeah, exactly. should I just do it here too?
Yes, but I just, for the context is that Luke's wife Nicole, it was her birthday the other day. What, 2 days ago? Right?
Yeah.
And she has expressed an appreciation for James's wedding stories, which makes sense. They rule. And so while Luke had asked for pictures of pets for Nicole for her birthday, James was like, I know of a perfect gift, tailor-made for you. It is another wedding story. Mm-hmm. So that's the context. Anyway, I think you should just tell it.
And I did show my fish in the background at one point, so I mean that counted.
Yeah, so it's a pet. Yeah.
So here's what happened. I was DJing a wedding at a place that's no longer in existence in Grand Forks, North Dakota. And I actually confirmed this with the other guy that was there. I tagged him on Twitter, and he agreed that that's what happened.
Is that the guy because you said Rob? Is that the Rob I know?
I don't believe so. No.
Okay.
No, this was somebody different. But I did confirm it with the other DJ, who saw it before I did. So I was DJing this wedding over at this hotel at the base of the Demers Bridge in Grand Forks, North Dakota. Had to be winter of 2002, I want to say, like January. It was about like 2001, 2002, I forget which. So we are doing this wedding. And
post 9/11 pre-Iraq. Got it.
Let's do that. Wow. All right, so if we're gonna,
if you want a mood check on,
let's go with that. Especially with the story I told during the D&D or after the D&D session. So I'm doing this wedding, and I have somebody who's working in the wedding with me. He's just on the mic the entire time. I'm just handling all the music. Great relationship. We did that for a long time, and I've just played the YMCA. We're about 2.5 hours into the dance. People are loaded from the open bar, and the groomsman comes up and is like, "Play it again, play it again." I had just played YMCA. Play it again. I was like, I'm not playing YMCA a second time. It's a 5-minute song. It's a 5-minute song, but I'm not doing this. No human should ever play YMCA twice in a row for a wedding.
This is no Tom Waits.
Yeah, what Tom Waits song are you playing at a wedding?
No. It's or actually, I think it might have been Tom Jones. It's the John Mulaney joke.
Yeah, that's Tom Jones.
Yeah, my bad.
I'm just envisioning the theme song to Peaky Blinders being played multiple times at a wedding. Like, why would you do that? That's amazing. Actually, for a now that I'm thinking about it, if you were doing an announcement for the bridal party like arriving and like the individual couples coming in, that song might not be terrible. But that's just
okay. But that song 40 times?
No, that's a terrible idea. But yeah, so the guy was upset that I wasn't going to play YMCA a second time, so he storms off. I get called away by I'm still at the table. I'm looking away because I have somebody who's come up to give me a request, and when that happens, the groomsman that I just said no to had picked up a chair and had folded it and was about to take a swing right at me. WWF style, was ready to take my head off. And this bridesmaid,
again, as you do,
yes, you do. This bridesmaid saw what was happening, walked over, and in one fluid motion, grabbed him, put chair down, opened it up to put it down, and took him out onto the dance floor and started dancing. Never had a problem for the rest of the night with them. He got distracted by the bridesmaid when he wanted to take my head off.
If I were in his situation, which I honestly,
were you a violent man?
Right. I'm probably not there unless it's Luke Braun. If he's DJing wedding, chairs everywhere, right? Other than that, probably not going to happen. But if I'm in that situation, hey, you're not playing Closing Time. What song would I care that much about?
I'm just imagining you being upset they're not playing Lady in Red twice. That's Arif's jam, and we both know it. So I see it out of the corner of my eye.
I'm just saying I would also be distracted by a bridesmaid doing that. Yeah, I would be fair. Enthralled by that.
Yeah. So I'm going to leave that one alone. But the guy who was with me noticed it before I did and was trying to get the words out to say, "Hey, James, look out. That guy's going to try to get your head off," because he's on the other side of me. He's on my right. The guy who is about to swing the chair is on my left. I look up just in time to see the full, like the bridesmaid move and like grab chair and take out to the dance floor. Like that moment.
That's incredible.
Oh my God. That was terrifying. So, yeah.
Bridesmaids are like superheroes or supervillains, right? Like it's that they gain powers during weddings.
Yeah. There's very few neutral bridesmaids. Again, speaking of somebody who was a wedding DJ for 17 years. But the question is about other tales of near death. And I know you've told your story of caffeine poisoning. So, I mean, I feel like that counts. I was driving, oddly enough, to a wedding to DJ out on, when I was living in the cities out in Bloomington, and I was taking 394 into downtown, and right by the exit, which is now by where the stadium is, where the Twin Stadium is, somebody was going the wrong way, and he nearly slammed into me there. That would have ended me. I don't know. Other narrowly avoided catastrophic injuries.
Before the show, we were discussing how I would get myself involved in a story that could either result in a catastrophic injury or a narrowly avoided catastrophic injury. But until that happens, I can't tell the story, right? So
yeah, it would ruin the wake.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
If anything, you have to preserve the bit, and you have to preserve what would happen for your memorial. I think that's the most important thing.
Which I think everyone wants to hear at wakes. What stupid way did this guy die? I think that's what wakes are for, right?
That's basically
it. Yeah. So I feel like there's probably a number of narrowly avoided catastrophic injuries that I just haven't crossed my mind as stories to tell, but were I to be reminded would be like, oh yeah, no, this time I almost lost an arm. But yeah, at the moment, I can't think of any, but I know that I've lived a life that, like, caffeine poisoning aside, I probably shouldn't be here.
Yeah.
Right? So the stories will be incoming. We'll see.
Every day I walk is a laugh in the face of God. That's
Right.
that's all there is to it. Leon Smorgasbord asks, beyond dominating with JMU, and I sense it,
Right.
and because it would probably be too easy, which G5 team would be the most worthy of being brought to dynasty level in the College Football 25 based on vibes alone?
There's a lot of really good candidates.
I'm always a big fan of elevating the Gamecocks.
Well, but they're a P5 team, so you can't.
Oh, yes, my bad.
Yeah. Or I guess P4 now. It's screwed up. But I think like Tulsa and Memphis both have pretty great vibes for this. Now, I've got a friend who is an Alabama Birmingham alum, so he would hate to hear that. But which also Alabama Birmingham would be a ton of fun. You know, the College of Joe Webb and Roddy White. I've listed them in the appropriate order of importance. I don't know. The Blazers are just generally pretty fun, but I think I want to go with like a Georgia State or a Georgia Southern or something like that. I think those vibes are great. Georgia Southern, Jerick McKinnon's from there. So is the other Adrian Peterson. But they tend to play up to the level of competition from what I can remember of like these like Power 5 schools. They've got a great recruiting ground. You know, the pipeline is Georgia, right? And specifically like the Metro Atlanta area, which I know that you can create a pipeline specific to those metro areas. I kind of like that. I don't like FAU that much, not FIU either. I don't know, picking like a Toledo or an Ohio or whatever just seems like okay. I really like the vibes of like Memphis or Georgia Southern or something like that.
Next question is from Nolan Kaler, who asks, for never mind. For James's wedding corner, visiting this a lot today, my fiance and I are currently collecting registry items for our wedding next month. Should I burn my shower curtains, so we'll need a new one, or transition to Arif's passive-aggressive corner? What would be the best way to get it on the list?
Okay, I'm going to pause the congratulations because this is a manipulation question.
A first in Norse code history.
Okay, first of all, I feel like burning it, you're revealing your intentions a little bit too obviously here. I would use it as a way to pack the other items in the move, right? And that's going to tear it. And then you're going to need a new one, right? Like, oh, that was a really stupid thing for me to do, but it felt like I just needed to wrap all these items up, so I wasn't thinking, kind of thing. Like, yeah, you have to acknowledge being stupid, but it's at least, you know, you can see how that would happen. Burning it just feels like, come on.
Too much. People have been losing things in the move for generations.
Yeah. So something like that. But I don't know how from there you can make sure it's the Norse code shower curtain, especially because I looked up the price and it's not like the cheapest shower curtain. That doesn't mean you shouldn't buy it. You should. But that one's like it is a wedding registry gift, so maybe because it's expensive, actually, it's an easier one to put on. But you have to do a little bit of convincing, and I just don't know how to do that.
He's almost got me watching CFL. I feel like he can break her down eventually on this.
Yeah, that's definitely the way that you should view marriage.
Yeah, that's again. Right. I'm not opposed to a marriage. This is how it works. This is how it works. It's fine. The Richard Seymour divorce, just a hell of a username. Yeah. If you were to predict one training camp menial trade, who would be leaving, or what position will they bolster?
Like a Jesse Davis type trade, like traded the Steelers for like a future 6th, 7th round swap.
Yeah.
Well, actually, maybe. Well, I don't know that the offensive line is as deep as it was last year. I could see a bottom of the roster receiver going somewhere like a Lucky Jackson, a Thayer Thomas, a Trent Sherfield. Unlikely because they haven't like proven themselves to be worth trade, and people might wait until like waivers. I could also see tight end, right? But the thing is, the Vikings will be able to stash a tight end because TJ Hawkinson's probably going to be on IR, and so they'll have an extra tight end spot. But somebody like Nick Muse or Robert Tanyan or N'Keal Harry or even a Samus Reyes, who you probably don't need to trade because he's an international pathway player, so you've already got the roster spot. But like somebody along those lines makes a lot of sense to me. Other than that, definitely not defensive tackle, maybe edge rusher. That one's kind of hard. Definitely not linebacker, certainly not cornerback or safety. So I guess tight end, trade away or bring in running back. Like I know the Vikings signed Aaron Jones, but we don't even know if Cam Akers is on the roster because of the physical thing. Like it hasn't updated the transaction report yet. I don't know how confident people are in Kenny Nwangwu or Dwayne McBride. And so I could see them bringing in a marginal running back, maybe a marginal defensive tackle as well. And then, of course, we will expect them to make a more serious move at cornerback for the reasons that we talked about earlier in the show.
Nick Muse to the Browns. I feel like that's what's coming. Browns seem to pick up Vikings like the Seahawks used to.
Well, yeah, I mean, Stefanski, yes, that makes sense.
Also from the Richard Seymour divorce, what game this season should all Norse Code fans attend in spite of security's outdated ticket admission obsession? So for those who missed it, last night, there was a soccer championship that ended, well, that started, it ended late too, but it started late due to the fact that about, I don't know, a couple thousand fans decided to just rush the gates. The Copa America, they decided to rush they rushed the gates. They snuck in through the ventilation system like John McClane in Die Hard. When people got to their seats, they discovered that people were already in them and they refused to move, and security wasn't doing anything about it until they finally realized the extent of the craziness. And there are some great pictures of how jam-packed that stadium was.
Yeah, it was overcrowded, yeah.
And they ended up they halted the game in order to go section by section to find out if you had your tickets. And they ended up starting late to take care of this. It was truly remarkable.
I think this is a lesson in the power of unions.
Go on.
Well, because this is like collective action resolved a problem that individual action couldn't. I want to see the game and I don't want to pay for it. Oh wow, 3,000 of my buddies have the same interest here. So they all banded together and collectively decided that they were going to enter the stadium. And it worked. And I just think that tells us that working together against a force that is more well-armed and has nominal authority and represents literally gatekeeping.
The literal gatekeepers.
Yeah, the literal gatekeepers. I just feel like this is a pretty good example of how bonding together over shared interests to fight against a corporate interest works out. They can't arrest all of you at once, probably.
Well, they tried.
They tried, but they couldn't.
No.
That's the important part.
I went to a Rage Against the Machine concert during the Republican National Convention in 2008. And the convention was in St. Paul. Concert was in Minneapolis over the Target Center. It's my favorite concert I've ever been to. It was absolutely nuts. It was either number one or number two. It was absolutely nuts. One of the craziest things I've ever seen. And at one point, we got seats in the old Target Center. Like, we were in the seating section. We were not on the floor. I wanted nothing to do with the floor for how angry everyone was. And it was one of the most amazing things to see when it broke. When the seating section on the other side of the arena all just rushed down onto the floor. And the floor looked like it did look like sardines. Like, it was just watching everyone like pour into this bowl. It was remarkable, and I could not have imagined actually being on the floor for that. That was nuts. But,
incredible to see people rage against the machine.
Raging against the Asia security. I forget the name. Like it's always on their shirt whenever they did security for events back in this period of time in Minneapolis. But yeah, terrifying. As for the answer to your question, the Green Bay game, I feel like in Green Bay, that is the one that everyone should attend. Yep. I can't see that going poorly. Next question is from Skibbleshanks, the Railway Cat, who asks, this is actually in reference to a Patreon bonus episode that we just put out. Arif, I'm addressing it to you. Arif, please rank Taylor Swift's discography, including her contributions to the Cats soundtrack from 2019. Please be advised that I do have Swiftie friends who are ready and willing to take action if this question goes unanswered.
There are 11 albums? Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay.
Are you going to go 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D? Cats being 2.
Cats, yeah. I am going to skip Cats and the Taylor Swift Holiday Collection. And just go to the albums listed in the discography. If there is a Taylor's version of that album, then that's the one I'm ranking, I guess. I don't know. But this is someone who does not listen to very much Taylor Swift, so obviously my opinion on this is ironclad. I'm going to go 1989, Reputation. Oh, geez. Oh, I'm lost. Probably Red and then Taylor Swift, so the self-titled. And then Folklore.
You are messing it up.
Boy, I am digging some holes here. Then Lover. Is Fearless actually going to feel like I'm like sleeping on it or something?
At what point do you feel like I'm going to help you with this?
Okay, that's good. It's just more like musing than actually thinking that you're going to help.
Yeah. I am the opposite of helpful at this point.
Okay, I'm going to look at the track list for Midnights and Evermore and make a decision based on whether or not oh my gosh, these Wikipedia articles are so long. I just want the track list. Okay, I've heard 2 of those songs. What in the world? Oh my god, Midnights has so many additions and bonus tracks. Oh, geez. Oh, I don't think I've heard any of those songs. Okay, so that puts Evermore ahead of Midnights for me. So Evermore's next. Then I'm gonna go Fearless, and then what's on Fearless? Should I move Fearless up? Track listing. Here we go.
I feel like it's the coward's way to move it up at this point.
Yeah. And then I'll go. What's on Speak Now? What's up with that one? How are we doing there? These are so long. Okay. Oh, Dear John. That's the one where the original one was like homophobic, right? Maybe I shouldn't have said that out loud.
I think we've gotten all we need from this section.
And then I'll go Midnights, and then Tortured Poets Department, which I listened to a little bit and didn't actually like that much, and then Speak Now. If you Google my address, I don't live there. I just want you to know that.
You'd need to contact the Minneapolis PD to get his updated address.
Oh, Jesus.
Skimbleshanks also asks, what would be your food of choice for competitive eating?
Okay, so James apparently has an answer to this, and I'm really curious about it. I think I don't want to stray too far from the hot dogs, but obviously I can't do that because that's been pretty optimized and it would be very difficult to break into. But I also don't like a lot of the other common items for competitive eating, at least for me. I think James knows I'm a very slow eater anyway.
This is, you entering an eating contest would be hysterical to me.
Okay, so I have entered eating contests and I've done pretty well because I'm a very competitive person, James. You know that.
I'm familiar.
If I prohibit myself from talking while eating, And then I also, on top of that, have an incentive to eat quickly. I can eat pretty quickly, or at least I could. I don't think I've got the chops anymore, but I could. And I've won eating contests with my friends. I'll say that. But after the pasta one, I kind of just didn't want to have pasta for 6 months. And also, that sucks. I'm not going to recommend that kind of eating contest. I just think with chicken wings, there's just like a lot going on there. Too complicated. Pizza, I'm not feeling it. I'm going to stick with something very similar to hot dogs, sliders. But you have to standardize, obviously, the size of the sliders. And also not the White Castle sliders, like actual sliders that you grill, not steam. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's gross. I am on the record as saying how much I dislike White Castle.
Great.
My answer is slightly different. I would consider pizza, but I think the best way I could break into a market that does not exist for this, as far as I know, is the Haribo sugar-free gummy bears. I feel like
gosh.
I feel like I could do that.
Great.
I would want death. It's basically eating bleach, but sometimes you just want that sort of emptiness in your life.
Right.
That's
I can't disagree with that.
Yeah. Kyle Slaby asks, for the socio-political corner, what are your thoughts on the state of the gnome versus knight war? Should King Crawley be given more power, or was he merely an ignition to a moment of history that has surpassed him?
Okay, so from my understanding, this is like a TikTok thing. Okay, so here's a problem with like lore that exists on TikTok. And I mentioned this before the show, and James was like, but Arif, you were very into the Baby Witch stuff. Baby Witch versus the Moon. Not going to go into it here. Sorry if that sounded tantalizing.
That's the 20, in case you want to listen to that, 2020 Christmas show has everything you need to know.
Yeah, so the problem with TikTok lore is that there is no method of organizing that I have found of TikToks that give you the lore, nor is there any agreed upon thing. So the reason the Baby Witches stuff was easy is because it's in reference to an existing canon of witchcraft that people will refer to that exists outside of TikTok, and then they'll bring back into TikTok and use that understanding to like put out their take or whatever on this witch thing, right? Fine. But this thing seems to exist entirely on TikTok, and it's so difficult to get lore because searching it doesn't really help. The search function in TikTok is awful. And like 2 years ago, I learned that people will use the search function on TikTok to like find out answers to questions, which horrifies me because every time I use the search function, it's insane. Like when I search King Crawley Gnome War, right, as an example here, the first result I got was a video with 426 views. Like, why would that be the one that tells me the thing I need to know? The second one only has 2,000 views, but it's someone looking at a book. So I'm going to assume that maybe this person maybe knows more or is explaining lore, but that's weird. The fourth one has 200,000 views, right? Like, but which is nice. And that's maybe an indicator that this one is relatively important in the lore here. But the problem is you want to learn the lore in some order. And not only are these not organized by like view count or engagement or anything like that, but also there's no dates in the search results, at least on the web app, maybe in the phone app. I don't want to open it on my phone. So maybe there are dates there, but I would like it in some order. I would like it in order from the most like these are all canons that are created through viral additions to the meme, and people will take it or leave it. Like if this 400 view TikTok says King Crawley is dead, that's not part of the lore. No one has agreed with this canon. It's a canon by consensus. It's insane because you can't learn the consensus. So I don't know what the answer is, Kyle Slaby, and I don't want to. Okay? That's your answer.
I feel like the Reddit search function is somehow better than the TikTok one.
Yeah, okay, so
and that's
Google
hilariously
searching
bad. Google's fine, yeah.
Google searching, I mean, Google's bad. Google searching Reddit is incredible. And then Reddit's search function is also awful, but it's still better than the TikTok one.
Yeah. Room Bull Sharif asks, I want to get buried at sea. Which sea or ocean should I do so?
Oh, probably like the Scandinavian Sea, right? Like whatever, like in the fjords of Norway. That feels appropriate. Other than that, I don't like. I don't know. The Gulf of Mexico's had like a lot of stuff done to it, so I just avoid adding to that. That seems complicated.
Just put your body on top of that Texas-sized plastic thing out in the Pacific.
Yeah, I was thinking like the Pacific's really big, but if you wanted to like really like be at a place, it would be probably like the giant plastic patch, because it feels like, now you're one with a piece of history that sucks. Tasmanian Sea, that seems nice. But yeah, I don't know. I don't really have an answer to this one. Should I? I don't feel like I need to.
That's unfortunate. I feel like burying people at sea is something that you should become an expert in, or at least knowledge of where they should go. I feel like this would be something nice to add on to a LinkedIn that somebody could find for you.
I don't know what you're talking about. I will say I do have opinions on seas that I wouldn't want to be buried in. Dead Sea, the high salinity lakes and seas of South America. Honestly, any of the large bodies of water in Central Asia, primarily because of how development in those bodies of water have really poisoned those bodies of water in really significant ways. So like the Aral Sea has dried up a ton, but also has been subject to a ton of chemical runoff. I have opinions on seas I don't want to be buried in. It's just the ones that I do want to be buried in. Like the Mediterranean seems nice. Is that better than the Tasmanian? Is that better than the Indian Ocean? I don't know, man.
Well, let's go to our final question, which is from Drunken Vike, who asks, what are Arif's favorite WNBA teams to watch from a playstyle/excitement perspective? Planning to surprise a significant other with a trip to some games, but I am woefully undereducated on the league.
Wow, fantastic. I love that I got this question. So the good news is only 12 teams, so not super difficult to figure out maybe who you might want to watch based off of certain characteristics. So in terms of like experiencing the moment and having a lot of excitement and enjoying this collective experience everyone's having, which is what a lot of sports is, obviously the Indiana Fever with Caitlin Clark. Now, I don't like their play style. I think that, first of all, they've changed it 3 or 4 times. And the first play style was really bad for the Fever and for Clark. The second play style was actually pretty good for the Fever and for Clark. But then they wanted to start getting Clark more shots again. And now it's this like really weird ISO type offense where there's not as much player movement as there should be, and they're not setting up screens for her, which is where she excels as a shooter, and they're not doing as much pick and rolls and pick and pops as they need to, because she's an incredible pocket passer. So like they're not doing the stuff that really maximizes her, but like watching her in a stadium full of other people there to watch her is a phenomenal experience. So like it's still recommended. It's just it could also be very frustrating. Like Kelsey Mitchell, for example, is their leading scorer, not Caitlin Clark. And Kelsey Mitchell right now in the role that she's been assigned to is like a very catch and shoot. And so she doesn't like get to move that much. And she's like a very agile, fast player. And because she's a catch and shoot and because she's not doing point in the offense like she was a couple of years ago, like sometimes she'll be running around in circles. Fans will get mad at her, but the offense is not set up for her to do stuff. So really it's like Caitlin Clark to Aaliyah Boston is like most of the offense, unless Kelsey Mitchell is open and Nylissa Smith is also there. And that's a tragedy because Smith is talented. She should not be, is also there. She should be a part of this offense. So it can be frustrating, but that is a great experience. If the LA Sparks still had Cameron Brink, that'd be fun because Khyree Jackson, the other rookie, is having a really stellar season. So having Brink back would have been nice, but she's injured. And so it's just really Dearica Hamby and Khyree Jackson. And I don't know that offense is very fun. If you want to watch, if it wasn't for the fact that Nafisa Collier was injured, the Minnesota Lynx would have this masterclass on defense, which is great because the Timberwolves just had that. They're still very good defensively, but they're really just like they're a team that excels with Collier in the middle, enabling this like cadre of guards shooting a bunch of threes. And without that, it's kind of tough, but they're still pretty good defensively. Connecticut is probably the team that is the most interesting to watch, but not the most exciting, which is that they play with maybe the slowest pace in the league. They've got this fullback basically as a point forward in Alyssa Thomas. And she's like a wizard, and she plays like she doesn't care about the livelihoods of the people on other teams. And that's always fun to watch, but it is a pretty slow style. Points are pretty low. They stifle these other teams and force them to late into the shot clock and stuff. So the two teams that I would probably watch for pure excitement are the Las Vegas Aces. Asia Wilson is having an insane year now that Chelsea Gray is healthy. There's a lot of really great distributing. So Asia Wilson is the primary scorer. She's also the primary defender. And then just some other night, a different all-star is just going to go off. It could be Kelsey Plum. It could be Jackie Young. It could be Chelsea Gray, although she hasn't fully returned to form yet. So that's like a ton of fun to watch Asia Wilson. The other team to watch would probably be the Phoenix Mercury, especially now that it seems like Diana Taurasi might be coming back and is healthy again, because Taurasi on the floor with Brittany Griner, really great stuff. Taurasi wasn't doing well at the beginning of the season with Griner was injured, but the Mercury play with the fastest pace in the league, and they shoot the most threes. And Natasha Cloud, essentially their point guard, plays with like reckless abandon. She like 1,000 miles an hour. She probably throws passes like way too hard, but plays with a lot of enthusiasm. They've got like some 3-and-D shooters like Rebecca Allen and Sophie Cunningham, so they'll shoot some threes. But like Brittany Griner just holding it down in the middle, or when she's out, Natasha Mack is in, who is a defensive star. It's a ton of fun, and Brittany Griner is so good. And so when she gets in the paint and she can just do what she needs to do, it is like really fun to watch. I don't like Diana Taurasi for reasons that have to do with like 2004, but she is fun to watch. She will always argue with refs and stuff. So there's that. But I mean, they're like just a fun team to watch. They play at 1,000,000 miles an hour. Their record is not as good as it should be, but they'll probably be a threat once we get to the playoffs. So if you can get a Mercury versus Aces game, that's probably the best one. But either the Mercury or the Aces is probably my recommendation. I would not watch the Washington Mystics.
And that is it for this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. We'll be back soon. Arif, what do you have to plug?
So it's the Wide Left Substack. I've got the piece from Luke Braun about kicking up there. I've also recently pinned a piece on gun violence for fairly obvious reasons. And then my next piece coming out will be on Jared Goff. It'll be kind of like a follow-up to the Jordan Love piece. Is Jordan Love good? This piece is going to be, is Jared Goff good? And I actually don't even know the answer to that yet, so I can't even tell you where I'm going with that piece, but that'll be coming out soon.
Well, that's it for this episode. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. We'll be back soon. So for Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening, and maybe put it in a garage next time. And we'll be back soon. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, and wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan of and he can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. I am your producer and host, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN or at my personal account at Big Mono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can do so in a couple of different ways. You can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there. For $3.50 a month, you get bonus material and more. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode for a one-time donation, or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up some Norse Code merch. Any questions or comments that cannot fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, we thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this.
Hey, all things are possible through the power of Ben DiNucci.